Topic 3.2, the 7 Years' War, or French and Indian War. The learning objective is to explain the causes and effects of the 7 Years' War, or French and Indian War. The thematic focus at this time is going to be diplomatic, economic, cultural, and military interactions between empires, so France and Britain, nations, and peoples, which will also include Indians too. Shape the development of America and America's increasingly important role in the world. Key concept 3.1, Roman numeral I, subtopic A. Colonial rivalry intensified between Britain and France in the mid-18th century as the growing population of the British colonies expanded into the interior of North America, threatening French Indian trade networks and American Indian autonomy. So during the 1700s, both France and Britain are expanding. So France here, shown in the bluish purple, is going to be expanding eastward, while the British colonies here, shown in orange, are going to be trying to expand westward towards the Ohio River Valley. See the Ohio River Valley right here? See the Ohio River? This territory here, the Ohio River Valley, is going to be the scene of this push that's happening from both sides of colonial forces. So both nations, they've been using mercantilism to build up their nation's wealth. That force of mercantilism, trying to expand their colonies, get more raw materials to bring back home to the mother countries and make more money off of that, and then sell and ship products back overseas to make money in the colonies, selling their manufactured wares there. That whole process of mercantilism is a huge motivating factor for these two countries, Britain and France, in trying to get more territory. So they're pushing in toward that Ohio River Valley area, and this is the disputed area here that's causing so much trouble. So there we go again. The Ohio River Valley is being shown as the important hotbed of where territorial disputes are occurring. But I should say, the English colonies, they haven't had a great relationship with natives, but the French have. The French were known to be much more inclusive with the natives. They're trading, fur trading being very popular with the natives. They have a good relationship with them in that way. And also, if you remember from earlier topics 2.2 and 3, the English had their own families. Women from England came over. They had families. The English then stayed very separate from Indians. Meanwhile, the French often came over alone and did intermix with an Indian. So once again, relations much stronger between French and Indians than between British and the Native Americans. We're also going to have these wars in Europe that are taking place between Britain and France. So Britain and France went to war 3 times in Europe between the years 1690 and 1750. These Wag Wars, as you might call them or hear them called, they're called the Wag Wars because it's an acronym of all the kings and queens' first names. So Wag, William, and George, that is an acronym to help you remember the wars between these powers. King William's War is represented on the chart here, 1689 to 1702. Queen Anne's War here, 1702 to 1714. And King George's War, we have 1727 to 1760. So those wars, more evidence of poor relations between these countries fighting in Europe. So they're fighting already. That fight is going to eventually make its way to their territories. It kind of makes sense, right? So they're fighting in Europe. Eventually, it's going to be fueling fighting in the American territories that they own. So continuing on with the Native American strand of things, Native Americans are not happy about either side really encroaching on their territories, but remember, they're actually friends with the French to some extent. So it is the British that they are most worried about and upset about. The British continue to have poor relations with them and are encroaching further and further with their settlements. They're not trading with the natives like the French are. The relationship's not one that they're excited about. So as the British are coming further and further into their territories in the Ohio River Valley, it is concerning them. So they're going to want to group up with the French and support the French in the coming conflicts. Also, diseases and wars forced Native Americans to have to continually retribalize and regroup to be able to survive. So new tribes are forming. Things are quite unsettled in the Native American world. Iroquois moved away from English alliances and are going to start playing the French and English against each other. While Iroquois tried to remain neutral, they did accept gifts and formed covenant chains with individual colonies. Right, in 1754, the colonists from across the British colonies met in Albany, New York at the Albany Congress. Ben Franklin played a leading role there, proposing an Albany Plan of Union. The Albany Plan of Union. The Albany Congress, their purpose is to discuss the Indian issues, talk about those Indian attacks and how they're going to work together to form a united front against them. They propose an intercolonial government, a system of recruiting soldiers, and a way of collecting taxes to support the common defense. The colonies are too hooked on their autonomy. They're not going to be willing to give up that autonomy to help each other. So it's going to fail. The Albany Plan of Union does not succeed. This woodcut here, the join or die engraving, it's actually Ben Franklin's, and it shows how together the colonies, they could have been a force to be reckoned with against the Indians, but they are separated and therefore not able to mount a sufficient defense. Key concept 3.1, Roman numeral I, subtopic B. Britain achieved a major expansion of its territorial holdings by defeating the French, but at tremendous expense, setting the stage for imperial efforts to raise revenue and consolidate control over the colonies. So in short, this College Board key concept is trying to say the British do win the French and Indian War, but at a great cost of money. So they're going to double their debts, basically. Double the debts that they had prior to the war and really want to have to pay that off. So the French and Indian War breaks out, begins in 1754. A Virginia governor sends George Washington into the Ohio River Valley area to basically disrupt the making of Fort Duquesne. So the French are making Fort Duquesne, and in other areas in that Ohio River Valley, they're also threatening to basically create a stronghold. But they go to Fort Duquesne, and on the way there, George Washington has a little skirmish with a group of French that he's successful in actually winning that skirmish. But soon after, at the actual Fort Duquesne conflict, he loses pretty badly and has to surrender. So that's how the war really begins. It's those shots fired that kick off the war in the colonies. This is George Washington here. I just thought it was kind of neat to show George before his actual American Revolution days. So 22 years old, George Washington is leading up a charge on Fort Duquesne. And in the play Hamilton, they actually reference that. So there's a moment where George is singing about his past and how he had failed his soldiers at one point. That part right there is talking about his failure in Duquesne. All right, so at first, the tide of the war is not doing too well for Britain. The French are really winning at first. The French and Indians have grouped up together and have a strong first showing. However, William Pitt is going to become prime minister in England, and he is going to basically give a blank check of money to do anything they can to support this war. They're going to send over more British troops, and they're going to basically say this war needs to be won at all costs, and we're gonna do that. So the American soldiers feel that they're doing a good job. The British soldiers feel that the Americans are not. They come and they bail out the Americans, and they ultimately win this French and Indian War. So the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1763, which officially ends the war. France loses Canada, most of its empire in India, and claims to lands east of the Mississippi River. Spain got all the lands west of the Mississippi River, New Orleans, but lost Florida to England. And Britain gets both French Canada and Spanish Florida. So huge win for Britain. Britain comes out of this coming way out ahead. So if you look at the maps here and you're comparing, before 1754, when the French and Indian War starts, France has a huge stronghold in the Americas. Afterwards, French territorial claims just basically swept out of North America entirely. It is Britain dominating that entire area in the eastern portion of North America. So the year of the Treaty of Paris is 1763. Important to remember that. Just can you spot the difference? Can you see what's going on here? So this disputed land here in the Ohio River Valley caused the outbreak of this war. It's kind of the reason why the war started. French forces wanted to put forts in that area. British forces wanted to own more of that territory, moving west, and it causes the French and Indian War. And after the French and Indian War is all over, French claims to North America, gone. Right in the aftermath, literally 1763 still, so right after the war, Pontiac's rebellion takes place, and Chief Pontiac is upset at the fact that now the French are gone, and the British colonies continue to push west. So they're encroaching further and further into his territory. He wants to do one big last stand, push them back. So Pontiac goes and destroys forts and settlements all along British territories from New York to Virginia. Instead of allowing the colonists to really push back, it's the British that come and bail out the colonists, successfully do so. This is going to be a moment where Britain looks at the colonies sort of as a burden, like, oh, we have to continue to bail you guys out. So now they're going to start taxing the American colonies to get some money back. And they're also going to start tying up loose ends around the salutary neglect that they once had. So the navigation acts that made mercantilism stronger for Britain, so that the relationship between Britain and the colonies stronger, those navigation acts, they were very loose on the way that they were enforcing them before. Well, now they're going to start really being strict about the navigation acts. So salutary neglect, gone. They're no longer going to be very loose with the regulation of the navigation acts and other acts of that nature. So now they're going to try to pay back these debts from the French and Indian War by taxing the colonies, stopping their salutary neglect. So that's what this slide is going over. And a little preview, Stamp Act, it's coming up soon in the next topic. But Stamp Act is one of those many taxes that is being used to get back some money for that French and Indian War. The Revenue Act of 1762 is one that tries to end colonial bribery of customs officials and the rampant smuggling that was happening to get around the navigation acts. They also are going to permanently station troops in America because they figure we have to keep on shipping our troops back overseas to protect the Americans from the natives. Why don't we just keep them there, keep our redcoats there as a permanent force in America, which the colonists do not like. A little bit intimidating to have the redcoats in your backyard constantly. The Sugar Act of 1764 is another way to get back some money. Currency Act of 1764 bans colonies from using their own paper money or for paying debts. And then the Stamp Act of 1765, also incredibly crucial. Now, going back to Pontiac's Rebellion for a second. Pontiac's Rebellion was really annoying to the British soldiers. They have to come and bail out the American colonies and protect them from Indian attacks. Well, the British are going to decide, let's just make this line, this boundary line here. They're going to call it the Proclamation Line of 1763, and tell our colonists that they may not pass that line anymore. Let's just prevent the whole Indian attack thing and say, colonists, you stay in this territory here that is free of Native Americans, and we'll stop having to bail you out. So Proclamation Line of 1763 is drawn, but colonists are really upset. They just helped Britain win the French and Indian War, and they're thinking we're entitled to all this land that we fought for. We kicked the French out with you, Britain. Why can't we now take advantage of this territory for our own farming needs? We thought that was going to be the case. That's why we helped you. And Britain's response is, you didn't help us so much. We kind of did it pretty much on our own. And we fended off the French and defeated them for you. So no, just listen to us. Don't cross this line. So the Proclamation Line of 1763 is going to cause a lot of animosity from the colonists towards the British. They're going to be really upset with them. It is just the beginning of steep decline in the relationship between the British colonists and their British king overseas. That is the end of topic 3.2.